be paid by year end. And a lot of the transfers, I've done a lot of the transfers to and from reserves as much as I could get it up to date so far. So, okay, we're on business, good. Okay, this next slide is for council. So you're a little bit under budget, and I'm not sure if you have any questions on this one. What goes in your expenses is your per diems and convention expenses and so on, and there is a policy around what is eligible and what is not, and what your per diems are.
Not seeing any.
It's okay. So, the administration budget, it's pretty well on target. The transfer from the modernization reserve, we've made the transfers for the modernization funds to date that per council resolutions, and intake 2 is done. So intake 3 will be completed. Intake 3 to be completed at year end, right? But it goes on into 2023, I believe, and it's for the contract asset management coordinator and e-permitting. I think we have to report in early 2023. And some of that has been brought forward for the contract asset management. Some of her wages have been taken from the modernization reserve already. Let's see. At the end of the year, once Carson has completed all the election costs and so on, we'll take that from reserve and bring that into revenue for as a transfer from reserve for the 2022 year. Staff training so far is under budget, but there may be some more training this year. I'm not sure if you want to speak to anything on that, Dwayne. Any more on the administration? Just a few highlights there.
Nothing specific other than just in terms of we do have cyber training that we will need to be completing with all of our staff, in particular for insurance purposes. So in terms of as you're aware, in terms of our insurance premiums have been on the rise, and I think what you're going to see is a further increase in 2023, but there are measures that we can take to help mitigate that, and one of them is, for example, training for all the staff on cybersecurity. So we're going to undertake to complete that and we have the money in this year's budget to complete that during this fiscal. So.
Okay, I can speak to this one too, and maybe Carson. It's the police budget. So there's 2 components of the building: the estimated service cost plus the reconciliation from previous years. So the 2023 annual billing estimate is $948,472. So a significant decrease because of your new policing contract. Or you don't have one, they're under the OPP billing model. So it is less by $784,430. That's going to be the difference, because last year, or this year, in 2022, we paid OPP costs of $309,907 overall, North Huron, and the Wingham ward, it was $1,422,995 for a total of $1.732 million. So now it's going to be, and you will get a report from that, and you'll see it in your budget documents. It's brought down to $948,472. There was a reconciliation from the 2021 year, and there'll be a council report on what to do with that also, and that'll come to budget. It was quite a significant amount.
Does anybody have any questions on that one? That is quite a significant amount. Would anybody like staff to speak to that, or we're fine for today? Go ahead, Paul.
Through you, Reid. Yeah, I just wondered, at our previous meeting, I mean, Deputy Reid Sipes said that it was going into a separate account, the money coming back. I just wondered, I didn't.
Did you want to speak, or do you want me to, or whatever? Through you.
Yes.
There's been a bit of correspondence, emails back and forth on possibly, like, we should be bringing a report to council to what to do with that.
Okay.
It's 500 and some thousand, I believe. I should have written
Yeah,
that down.
597.
Yeah, this is a reconciliation from prior year. So, and it is part of the Wingham. There will be, at some point, correspondence coming for that.
Thank you.
And what to do with it.
So I'm going to follow up with a couple of questions. One would be, it's only for the Wingham ward, the reductions for the Wingham ward. My understanding is we're going to keep some of it in a kitty, so to speak, because we don't know what the next year is going to be like, so it's better to have a little much sitting there rather than get nailed. So would we be giving that back to the Wingham residents through a budget reduction? Or does that go in as the policing as a whole, and all communities, or all three of our communities would get a reduction? Just, Dwayne, can you just help me with that?
Yeah, so just so as council's aware, I'm going to backtrack and then come back a little bit. So Wisterio, for example, is a utility company that the town of Wingham owned that was sold. And we do receive a dividend check on an annual basis. And the money that we receive from that dividend goes into a reserve account. And that account builds, and that money that's in that account is intended for Wingham only, because that's, Wingham is the only portion at this point of the community that is part of Wisterio. The rest of the municipality, from a utility perspective, is serviced by Hydro One. So jumping ahead to policing, the reconciliation that has been referred to, and I think it's around 597,000, is a reconciliation from policing from our contract for Wingham only. So the plan or proposal here is that that money is money that has been paid by Wingham ratepayers, no different than the money from Wisterio. So the plan is that the money from the policing reconciliation go into a reserve account, and then that would be money available for council's use. But certainly from a staff's recommendation, because it was money that was paid for by Wingham, that it would be used to compensate Wingham in some form or fashion. So, for example, going back to your comment, Reeve, in terms of if you wanted to use it to offset taxation, that's certainly a conversation that council can have. The other consideration is council may wish to, there is a previous conversation about policing enhancements. If council was to, and I'm not saying this to do this, I'm just throwing this out as an example. If council decided that they wanted to provide policing enhancements and they wanted the policing enhancements to Wingham only, you could fund that from this reserve account, for example. So again, that's going to be, that money will go into a reserve account, and then that money will be sitting there for council to use, no different than the Wisterio funds.
So just before I move on, I'd just like to touch on the Wisterio so everybody understands, because again, out in the public, this gets a little confusion. When we amalgamated, Blythe had their own PUC. Blythe sold the PUC, and that funding, I believe, was used for different things in Blythe. Wingham, the Wingham Wisterio, the new council decided to keep it, and there's where we get the dividends of 60,000 or 70,000 every year. And then in East Wawanach, you guys have always been Hydro One, Ontario Hydro, I'd call it, and so therefore there's no dividends or anything. We just simply pay for the services. But Blythe actually owned theirs, Wingham owned theirs, but during amalgamation, I was not part of it. But something had to do, I've been told that the Blythe sold theirs off, I guess, to Ontario Hydro, and they decided to keep the Wisterio because it was financially worthwhile keeping. So just so we have that understanding. Okay, sorry, go ahead.
That's great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, Kevin, you had your hand up.
Yeah, just that explanation kind of got off thought in my questioning. The first question I had was if there's going to be a slush fund for one portion, should there not be one set up for the other two wards for anything that they may capitalize on, or is it just? My thought process is with the policing. Say if there it's pretty much a user pay. If there was a large incident where command would have to come in, or a large investigation in one section or the other, that would have to be compensated by the township. It'll be billed directly as an expense. So if that happened in Blythe, would that be the entire tax base would have to pay for that incident? And then, I just like, what I'm getting at is, Wingham would have a slush fund for that, but East Wabash and Blythe wouldn't.
Yeah, and I'm going to have the Terry speak to that.
How's that paid for?
So from my understanding, your tax rates, you had a special tax rate for Wingham for policing. So the users are getting back the money that they paid. So it's specific to users. So this credit that's coming back, which has happened over the years. Last year there was 235,870, and that reduced the tax rate for the policing for 2022. So this 500,000 and change will come as a report to council to put into reserve fund and possibly use for enhancement or so on. But once you're under the OPP billing model, from my understanding, anything that happens within the municipality, it'll be covered by the whole thing. The whole municipality is going to be paying OPP now. The whole municipality will pay for anything that happens within the municipality. So, and you will now not have a separate tax rate for policing. It's going to be wonderful administratively also, but because now you're under one OPP billing model. So you won't, Wingham is not paying a different amount than anyone else. The whole municipality is paying the same. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but my question was kind of on the other end of that yes, it is spread across the municipality going forward. So then if there is if something happened in Wingham, what I'm getting is the other wards would have to ante up, but Wingham ward would have a slush fund to pay for theirs.
Go ahead, Dwayne.
Well, no, you can,
Do you want to?
you can, sorry,
I was
go
just-
ahead.
I think that would be a decision of council at the time. I don't think I think what Dwayne was referring to was maybe some enhancement, like extra policing or something, if council decided Wingham needed extra policing, which would be an additional cost on your OPP billing. That would be specific to the Wingham ward. But if something were to happen, I think you'd have to go to council for an approval if you were going to use it for something like that. What you're referring to, like something that happened within the municipality in Wingham, specifically something really bad, that we had increased OPP costs. Normally, like in other municipalities that I've worked in, if it happens within the municipality, the whole municipality pays. It'd be a council decision at the time, I would think.
I would suggest on that, yes, that this is days gone by that we're still trying to clean up. Our favorite thing is we're always cleaning up. I would suggest that come before the next council, and the staff bring a report as to a slush fund and what the slush fund would be used for as a whole, now that we're all paying the same amount and all using until, I totally agree with you, Kevin. But that would be for the next council to decide and have a conversation in a council meeting. This slush fund she's talking about is specifically overpaying by the Wingham ward. It didn't affect, yeah. So anyway, I would just suggest that, and unless, Dwayne, you have something to add to it, I think should come up later.
No, I agree with you, Worship. Just in terms of, so I think in this situation, you might want to put it into reserve fund for 2023, and then the money's sitting there, and then just see how 2023 unfolds, and then decide. And going back to Terry's point, to take any money out of reserve fund, it has to come back to council. So it would come back to council, depending on what is going on at the time. There may be a staff recommendation in terms of, council says, okay, staff, how do we finance this? Part of a staff recommendation might be that you take X dollars out of that reserve fund, but again, that's subject to council's approval. So the money just sits until council gives direction as to the use of those funds.
And I would add, even though it's Wingham Ward money, it is the entire council that will make that decision, Kevin.
Yeah, no, my comment was just based on, this council's worked hard at getting a municipality-wide policing agreement, and I hate to see the first time up the bat that we throw another wedge in. I mean, I fully agree that the money was from the Wingham Ward and should be spent in the Wingham Ward. I just don't think it needs to be thrown into the policing portion of the township now that we've got an equal playing board for the policing.
Yeah, great conversation for a further council meeting.
And if
Go
I
ahead.
could, Your Worship, it doesn't, so it's money that was paid by Wingham taxpayers that will go into reserve fund. Unless council decides, it doesn't have to be spent on policing. So, for example, council may decide that this money was paid for by Wingham ratepayers, that the Wingham community should have a new playground equipment, or the Wingham community should have this. That's fine. It would be at the, unless you created a reserve-specific account, there would be flexibility by council as far as how that money is spent. So I just want to clarify, it doesn't have to be spent on policing unless council decides that that is what it's going to be spent on. So just to clarify any.
Great.
So the last slide I'm going to speak to is emergency planning. And in this department is the COVID expenses. So there was, I don't know a whole lot about this one, but the expenses include security and COVID screening and so on, and all the expenses that council has, or that the municipality has incurred up to date in for COVID.
Any questions
So we're
on
under
this one?
budget anyway.
Go ahead, Paul.
Yes, through you, Reeve. Yeah, I believe this took a big jump there when COVID hit there, so I'm happy to see that the actual is lower now, coming down.
Go ahead, Anita.
Yes, thank you, Reeve. With the vaccination clinics we hosted, did we get money back from the health unit or from the county, or how did that work? All the measurements and things we did and staff that was involved, did we get money back for that, or?
And I'm going to hand that over to Dwayne, and I also want to add into there, other communities were involved and how they helped us out too, is how I can Morris Turnberry, if you can just address that at the same time, financially.
Sorry, Worship, your question in just in
It
terms
was
of what
just-
they contributed?
Anita was, who contributed into it is what you're asking, right?
Yeah, who contributed into the vaccination clinics we hosted for the region?
Yeah. So in terms of the vaccination clinics, we did have, I'll call it in-kind contributions from one of the area municipalities in terms of just to support those vaccination clinics that we had. In terms of funding, in terms of how we offset those, there was some additional COVID funds that we received from a provincial perspective. But the other thing is, in terms of, from the county's perspective, the county indicated, that there were funds available, but the funds, the eligibility, based on our review, we didn't meet the eligibility in terms of, for example, it had to be staff above and beyond our normal staffing levels, for example. So they weren't not willing. The eligibility criteria basically was if we had to bring in extra staff to fund them. But if we didn't have to go out and bring in extra staff, then it was considered part of our operations.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
Anita, also add to that. So originally, when this took place, there was only going to be one place for vaccinations, and that was Goderich and Huron County. Stratford and Listowel in Perth County. I got a call from the mayor in South Huron. He wasn't too happy about that, so after conversations at the county level, we agreed to have vaccinations both in Exeter and here for Huron County. So I guess I kind of created, if any expense went to that, because it was never part of the major plan to begin with. I want to say that we put somewhere around 4,000 people through the arena down here. And Howick was very kind to join in, and the people from Howick, Morris Turnberry, and North Huron all joined in, and many of us counselors and many people from Wingham here, Blythe and East Wabash, we all joined in together on this. This was unprecedented, and we all kind of jumped at once. But we all worked together as a society and brought this over. So if there's a little financial burden on North Huron, it's simply because it was never meant to be to start with, okay? Thank you kindly.
Okay. So next up, Wayne, would you like to speak to the fire department? You can let me know when I want to move a slide, or?
Sure. So unfortunately, Marty wasn't able to be here today, but he did prepare his slide presentation, and he did send me some notes. So he just asked if I could go through them, and he certainly indicated if there are any questions to write down the questions, and he'll get back to folks. But essentially, he wanted me to convey that the fire department, from a 2022 budget perspective, is going to be close to budget or slightly over budget, and that will depend on the number of fire calls that we receive between now and the end of December. He indicated, or has indicated, and maybe Terry, if just move on to the wages for calls, and then on to the next slide concerning clothing, uniforms, and bunker gear. He's indicated that bunker gear increases, equipment increases, and the high price of fuel, just to name a few, which is what we're experiencing across the municipality, are part of the reason that the fire department is going to either be on budget or come slightly over budget. So for example, you'll see clothing, uniform, bunker gear, we had budgeted $25,000, but the actual came in at $31,201. So, and that was because the bunker gear increased by $1,000 per suit compared to last year. So that wasn't known at the time that we prepared the budget. So moving on, Terry. Training, travel, workshops budgeted was $20,000. The actual to date is $1,100. But he's indicated that medical first responder training happening over the next 12 months is going to use the remainder of that account, so that those funds will be utilized. Next one, advertising and promotion. There was a budget of $500. The actual was $669. He's indicating extra advertising was involved for the grand opening of the fire hall in the Public Works building back in June. And as well, he just wants to make council aware that there is still the Remembrance Day and Christmas advertising to do as well from a fire department perspective. Moving on, inspections and contracts, $75,000 it was budgeted. Right now we're sitting at about $35,000. He's indicating only showing approximately 50% spent, as only 2 quarter payments have been posted for the fire chief expenses. So as you're aware, we have a shared fire chief arrangement with Huron East. We've been billed for 50% of that cost. The other 50% of the cost will come later this year or possibly January. In terms of equipment repair and maintenance, budgeted $35,000. It's coming in at $38,000. The account is slightly overspent due to unforeseen repairs required to some apparatuses. He also is indicating installed a dump chute at T9, which costs more than budgeted. And they had an unexpected expense in terms of having to replace tires on a pickup truck. So that's why that account is showing us over budget. In terms of fuel, I think all of us understand, just in terms of he budgeted $10,000, it's right now $10,500. This account will be overspent because of the high cost of fuel. The Wingham and Blythe station budgets, some counts are showing only 50%. Not all expenses are received to date. Some expenses are a one-time internal transfer, what happens before year end. And as you're aware, we have a separate fire prevention officer, North Huron only budget. And in terms of the effect on that account, same as stated above. So just in terms of, finally, in terms of the fire department, in terms of capital projects, going to take $50,000 from reserves to purchase new extrication equipment. He's also, as council's aware, in terms of the new radio system. New radio system upgrades will be deferred to 2023. The project itself is being deferred to 2023, but the project will be funded out of reserve. So in terms of 2023 impact, no impact on taxation for 2023. But he's also indicating the radio upgrades are 95% complete, currently in testing phase, and that'll be part of the first piece. There's a first piece, and then that'll be the shared arrangement, which we have or are working with Morris Turnberry and the Public Works, and this will be the other piece to that. So that's it, I think, on the fire side.
Questions? Not seeing any. Terry? It's your turn again. Jamie's turn.
Want to just click on it?
This one, are you okay?
Yep. So I'm here to speak to the Public Works and Facilities Department. The Public Works and Facilities Department will also, probably by the end of the year, be on budget or over budget, again, due to increased fuel costs and the increase in parts and materials that we're facing right now. I did budget, and I didn't budget enough in 2021 for 2022, so there's that reason for the fuel increases and the parts, and basically everything's over budget. Building operations, when the shared, as council's aware, the shared services with Morris Turnberry for building stopped. So building is now part of the Public Works Department. So to date, we have had quite the increase in building permits. So you'll see a lot higher actual than budgeted, and we're pretty much on target for salaries on the building operations. And did you guys want me to stop each time for questions, or did you want to wait until the end?
Again, we're just going to jump in
Okay.
to Jamie once in a while, and if I don't see your hand, please just speak up.
Okay, thank you. Property standards and animal control are now part of the Public Works Department, and for the most part, everything is fine. The revenue for the animal control is higher than expected for right now, but otherwise, pretty much on target.
And that's usually because of the billing time, so it happens just as one time usually, and
Yeah.
then, so it works itself out over the target.
Thanks, Terry.
Yeah.
The Public Works and Roads, right now, we're at 70% of our current budget used. Now, this was for up until September. So as the winter hits, we'll see an increase in that money there.
Can you just explain to me the revenue where you budgeted 38,000 and it's like 5 times higher, 365%? Just what's that all involve?
Sure. Oh, go ahead.
Or, yeah, you can, or I've done a lot of reserve transfers, so that's reflective in the revenue
So
side.
just
for-
transfers then?
You've bought some fleet and so on, and so it's been recorded.
Okay, thank you.
So for streetlights, the expenses are like the electrical costs. You'll see that increase as by the end of the year as well. The air. Oh,
Yeah, through you, Rafe.
Yep.
Jamie, are we starting to see savings from using LEDs now?
through Lisa Bailey to Council Palmer, yes, there is savings. From your reviewing your past electrical costs to now, there is quite the difference.
That was a good move, all right.
And yeah, if I can add, even in the other municipalities that I worked at, they've recently, in the last few years, gone to LED and have significant savings also. So it's a good thing.
through rebate to Councillor Palmer, you'll also see savings in maintenance and material costs as well for the first, like, I want to say 1 to 4 years, because they're brand new lights, they're new Cobra heads or new street light tops. Later on, we might see a little bit of an increase once we actually have to start doing a little bit more maintenance on them. But for the most part, they do save money.
Okay, good.
As you're all aware, we no longer have the airport. There are some revenue that will be coming in because of the rental that we have with Mr. Warwick, who is the tenant farmer there. So that happens at the end of the year, so we haven't billed him for that. There is also some expenses that were incurred due to taxes that we still owed to Morris Turnberry for those agricultural lands, and some staff time to work through the sale process for the agricultural and woodlot lands. So you will see the $116,000 for the sale of the woodlot harvesting, and then the $4.2 million for the sale of the lands in 2023.
So I'd just like to add to that too at this point in time, and that again is, that land is in Morris Turnberry. We've been paying over $100,000 a year for maintenance, and again, as she said, the agriculture, money from the agriculture lands went into keeping that airport going. It is so delightful to see that we sold that. The new owners are doing so well, they're actually adding 3 more hangars as a private entity, and it's not costing North Huron any money to run now, and they still pay their taxes to Morris Turnberry, so we all bonused. This is one where we all bonused, and as I keep telling my council, remember, one day you'll be able to look over your shoulder and it's what you've achieved that counts. This is a big one for North Huron, okay? Thank you.
The waste and wastewater budgets, the budget to actuals are, there are transfers to and from reserves for the water and wastewater, which are completed at the year end. So those numbers are a little bit different. There is, again, there might be some overages in the water and the wastewater expenses, and again, that's due to parts, materials that have come in more than what was expected in 2022.
Kevin has a question?
Through you, Reeve. Is anywhere in here reflected the reserve that's being collected on the water and wastewater for the capital, future capital expenses? Like we don't pay a
Through Reeve Bailey to Councillor Faulkner, I just want to make sure, I just want to clarify, I want to make sure I'm understanding it correctly. So do you mean the transfer of capital funds from billing residents that's being moved over, or do you mean the overall reserve amount that's existing?
Well, a portion of our water and sewage bill is for future expansion or costing. Is that in this, or is that kept separate? I've never, as council, I've never known what that amount really is. We have what our payments are for water and sewer, but then there's a surcharge on top of that to build up reserves for infrastructure.
Right.
Is that in these numbers, or are those kept separately? What are they?
Through Reeve Bailey to Councillor Faulkner, from my understanding, they're kept separately. No.
Oh, yeah.
Am I wrong?
No,
Okay.
you're okay.
Okay. But I can bring back a more thorough report, breaking everything apart, once we have a little bit more information, and then once, not that this is messy, but once it's cleaned up and I can provide the more, because our water or sewer have to balance out to nothing. So once all that's completed, I'm more capable of being able to provide you that information.
Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead,
If
Jerry.
I can.
Yep.
So the wastewater and water fees are collected all year long, and that's why you see these higher numbers compared to the expenses. At the end of the year, what happens is we take the all the capital costs, the amortization costs, and so on, and take it out of the current reserves, and then put in any reserves. I believe it's up to your bylaw, and I'm not intimate with your bylaw, but if you do have a percentage for capital going into reserves, that amount has to come out of that revenue as a transfer to reserve first, before you figure out what your operating surplus deficit is, and then you make these transfers at year end.
Yeah,
Yes.
Because it's not shown, taxpayers sometimes, they ask, how much is in there now? And the question I have is, if there is a deficit, is that coming out of those to pay the deficit rather than going towards reserves for, there's no way of showing what, a line that this is how much you paid into and it's still there? Or did that get swallowed up and we're really not moving anywhere further ahead where we should just be charging more?
So, yes, those, when there is a deficit, so all the capital costs that we have will be pulled out of reserve. Then you'll put the revenue into reserve at the end of the year that we've raised, and then that is used to pay the capital. And then if there was a deficit in the operating, that comes out of the reserve. It's all user pay. At the end of the year, that department has to balance to zero. And this reserve is either increased or decreased depending on the experience of the year. Whether you spent a whole lot in capital or you had an operating deficit, that all comes out of reserve. Nothing touches the taxpayer. So you had, in September, we brought a reserve report to council, and it has those totals in there at the end of December. So you can see, I think I don't have a report with me, and I'm not sure I can get onto Keystone here. I don't want to wreck this, but I believe water has like over 3 million, sewer has over 3 million in it. There's a total of about 9 million and so on in water, wastewater reserves right now, in total. So at the end of the year, those will go up or down, depending on whether we have a deficit in operating, how much capital we have to pull out of those reserves, or if we have a surplus, we're going to top up our reserves.
That's just, it was my understanding that money would only go to future capital expenses, not operating capital. So, but from what you're telling me, the operating capital comes out of there too.
Go ahead, Terry.
So it's a bit complicated, but what happens what is it in the bylaws? Is it a percentage comes out of reserve, or out of the fees every year that you collect?
No, it's not a percentage. Well, I guess it would be. I don't have the bylaw in front of me either. Oh, but it is an amount, yes. So you're charged your fee for water and sewer, and then you're charged your extra capital fees on top of that. So the money that we're charging you is supposed to be covering all the expenses that it takes to create the water, to treat the sewage, to have the staff there to be able to run everything, plus administrative costs and stuff like that. So all that's charged there, and then there's your capital fee, and they all get put together. And then whatever overages am I saying it wrong?
No, that's okay. If
No,
you carry
correct
on,
me,
and then, so what'll happen is the capital portion of that fee gets pulled out and put into that capital reserve. So it's not affecting the operating surplus or deficit.
So, okay, so it's not used for the operating
Right,
deficit.
it's
Okay.
just
That's
used
what
for
I was.
capital. Yes, it's a bit of a process at your end to do all that and calculate all that. But yes, you separate your operating from your capital. Some of it is in similar reserve funds, but it is earmarked and we know what it's for.
But that amount's not shown on that revenue.
Not in there.
Okay.
This all happens at year end, after all of the capital's completed or the costs and the revenue are known, what they are at year end, and when all of the billing and the operating costs are completed at year end, then we know what we're working with.
Okay, thank you.
Does that make sense?
So again, I'm just going to add a little bit to that too. So in the agreement that we have proposed to Morris Turnberry, their request was to make sure, as Kevin's speaking, that the finances they put into reserve are in a different bracket. So it's not all part of North Huron, which is good for us because when we build the silo next year or the standpipe, and if it's $8 million, but we've got 2 million of that is reserved for them, then they know that 2 million is up to them to pay for, or why would we even build it? Same as pipes going down the road right from the silo on down, or from the pumps in Blythe to the edge of Blythe. If it's a 10-inch pipe that will do North Huron, we pay for a 10-inch pipe, but if we have to add 2 inches to it for the volume for Blythe, my understanding is then, or sorry, for our Morris Turnberry residents, because it's both in Blythe and Wingham. Don't keep thinking that this only involves the Wingham residents. Both of us are affected by this. Then what happens is they know that their money that they're putting into the reserves is going to be in there for when they need something fixed in Morris Turnberry, and it doesn't get gobbled up by us. So understand that's the way this should play out in the end of the day. That's the most important part, I do believe, unless somebody wants to try to correct me, but you've tried for 4 years and can't. Anyway. And that agreement has not been signed yet, so that you won't have that on your, on anywhere that I'm aware of. Okay?
So to continue. So stormwater management is our catch basin cleaning throughout the township, and that's been completed, and it's done, so. For waste management, there is a lot more, to date, a lot more revenue, and then the expenses, we were short-staffed for a little bit there, so that might be why we're not at the 75% of the budget used as compared to the years before. We also
Go ahead. Sorry, we have Chris has a question.
Is it okay to interrupt you right at this moment? With the news going on in the East Wanash landfill, there's more monitoring going on because there's issues, right? So is that going to affect the budget?
Through Reed Bailey to Councillor Palmer, no. The budget that we have set will be able to absorb the increased testing and sampling and consulting fees.
And legal, if it goes that far? I guess we don't know.
I'm not sure about that, but that'll be a report brought back to council.
Okay.
And my apologies, through Reed Bailey, there was also some sale of woodlot harvesting, which also increased the revenue to date. Moving on to cemetery, there has been an increase in plot purchases and interments. So you'll see a higher revenue amount, and the expenses are on target. For parks and trails operations, there has been an increase in revenue as there has been a bit more events or special occasions taking place within this area, and the expenses again we were understaffed, so we have some savings there as well for expenses. The library facilities, they're both pretty much on target. There has been some issues at the Alice Munro library. So in 2023, we'll need to budget for a new AC unit that has failed. I do have quotes already obtained, so you'll see that in the 2023 budget.
That's it.
So moving on to capital, it's kind of there. Now, this is a point in time. There has been more invoices and more work completed to date. So this is from the end of September. The town hall accessibility ramp, right now it shows there that that it's not there, but we'll be getting significant invoices come in the next little bit. So that type of, does anyone have any questions on this?
Just a quick one, it's really not to do with financing. So I see that they dug the big hole out there, and then I see everything is sitting still. So will we be sending them checks, and maybe that might next spring still be sitting there as a big hole, or is there some guarantee they're going to continue that work?
To answer your question with Bailey, no, they're continuing the work. They're forming right now, but there are certain items that they have to do prior to actually pouring in the concrete. So they have to get proper testing, inspections, and all that kind of stuff. So they have to We don't have a local firm that does compaction testing, so they had to hire somebody from outside of the area to come and do that, and then get their inspections, and they're actually going to start pouring today.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, do you want to move on? Sure. So the next section is the capital works for the sanitary and the water. Again, it doesn't show that it was much completed up until September 30th, but there was quite the rush come October and November. The Hutton Heights first phase, the water main is basically complete. There is restoration that needs to be completed on County Road 4 there for along Hutton Heights. There's also been quite a bit of work completed over on the well 4 upgrades, which were not budgeted for in 2022, but they came later on, and that's in the next slide. The SCADA system, that has been on the books for a couple of years, and I apologize for that. But moving forward with the standpipe, looking at everything about updating the SCADA system, which is basically the computerized system that runs the pumps and checks the water levels. It really doesn't make sense to update that prior to when the standpipe goes up. It should be done holistically and together, so that way everything functions and runs properly all at once.
I have a question.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah. The next section here, the user pay system, can you explain what that project status is? Like, what does that mean?
Oh, that is just, I believe it's just the total for what's spent for sanitary and for water.
Yeah, go ahead.
Through you.
Of course, go ahead.
Go ahead, Terry.
So I put those words in there because I wanted council to know if, that it is a user pay system for all of the costs of these water and sewer. Nothing is through taxation. I'm just going to go back one slide, and if you can see these capital works for the half tons and the haul, they're funded by taxation grants and reserves. But the water and sewer are funded through user pay, and that's why we close it out every year at the end of the year. So we
Zero.
totally zero it out so it doesn't affect the surplus deficit for the taxation. Okay? Is that
Thank you.
okay? So when I put that in there, that's what that means.
A further follow-up question on the chlorination for Blythe. It's complete. Is that the total that was only $8,000 to do that?
So through Reeve Bailey to Councillor Faulkner, this is actually a good news story. We were able to come up with a solution that was not going to end up costing what was budgeted. So the 369, there is going to be a few more bills coming through from our engineers, and because we do have to open up our ECA to get more of this completed and more formal with the ministry. But it works. The ministry's happy with it. Our operators are happy with what's functioning right now. So we're able to keep that money in the Blythe sanitary, or the sanitary reserves. So that is, it was a great solution that is functioning, and it's well, and the ministry is gonna work with us to get that reflected in our ECA. Now, having said that, though the Blythe sewage treatment plant needs work. So in order for us to install a UV system or anything to that extent would have taken up an immense amount of space right now in those smaller buildings. So future councils will need to, we will need to plan appropriately for when those changes need to be made, and a filter media, UV, all of that is much more than 369, but that 369 sure is going to help in the future to get those other things in place, and then again meet the criteria for sewage treatment.
Good news.
And I think that's all me.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Jamie. Vicki, it's your turn.
Good morning, council. How's everyone? So as you know, I have the lovely Department of Recreation and Community Services, so it does entail recreation facilities as well as childcare services and things. So on your screen there, we're going to start with that one on the Capitol.
Ignore this, just, it won't move on mine, so we're just doing it up there. So
Oh.
this is your capital,
Sure.
is that okay up there?
Sure. Can we adjust that a little bit, or?
Yeah,
Yeah.
probably have to go that way.
There,
you go.
there's
Thank you.
fine, all right. So in terms of capital works and things, we had, as council may recall, we are still in the process of that ISIP project. That was the funding application we put through back in November of 2019, and then we were finally notified last year that we received some funding, it's like 75% of funding for the rehabilitation of the North Huron West Cast complex. So that project entailed the replacement of the Dectron, and then roofing, the flat roof, some of the flat roof components up at the complex, as well as dealing with some accessibility improvements, and providing more opportunities and things. So that funding, the projects that were scheduled for 2022 are listed there. They should be, the majority of them that was planned for 2022 is being, or will be completed by year end, or should be. The largest of which is the Dectron. The new Dectron is in place. And then the roofing and humidity issues at the complex and things. So that was quite a bit of the money that was addressed. Not all the bills are in. They will be in very shortly. So once they're processed and things, we'll be then submitting a claims report to the province and the feds to get their portion of the revenue in. So that's not reflected there at all about that. In terms of, we had planned to do dehumidifiers this year at that complex, a dehumidifier at that complex this year. But unfortunately, with everything that was going on, we just couldn't get to it. So there was one that was being planned for this year and one for next year. We're just going to move the second, or the one from this year to next year, and hopefully get better pricing on doing 2 units up there. And that's for the arena itself and things. We did purchase the ice resurfacer, the Olympia, which was part of the budget, and that's in place as well. In Blythe, our capital program, we had in there for a condenser to replace the refrigeration condenser down there. That's been completed, as well as we've had to do some emergency replacements there on the boiler system. Council may recall I brought a report through early on in the year for, it was unbudgeted, but we had to deal with that for hot water and heating and things. In Blythe, we also did the lighting improvements on the Radford Diamond and the fencing as well. And listed there for the Columbus Center, the sound system and baffles is being moved to 2023. And that is, that's totally being funded under the ISIP funding program, and a contribution from the Knights of Columbus as well. Again, listed on that page, you have the, it says the wing and marina upgrades and things. It's still, that's just a continuation of what I was mentioning at the very beginning there about the ISIP grant and where things are at, so.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Kevin.
You just mentioned there the sound system and baffling was being funded by the Knights of Columbus? Is that what you just said?
Yes, so when we put through, back in 2019, when we put through the report to council, the application process actually looked favorably upon having partners. And the Columbus Center had come to us and had talked to us about some improvements over there as well, because they were having sound issues and things like that. And in that report to council, I indicated that they had agreed to partner with the municipality back then. And so then the improvements there that we submitted as part of the overall project, 25%, I think it's roughly 25 or 26% of the cost, 26.67%, I believe, will come from the Columbus Center, not the Columbus Center, the Knights themselves. And then the remaining part of that will come from the ISIP grant. There will be no tax dollars. And that was presented in the report to council as a request to submit that as an application and approve them as a partner.
So,
Again, that was in 2019, Your Worship. It was a while ago.
So I just have a question then. We forgave them, I think it was $60,000 last year for non-payment because of COVID-19. We all understand why. And this was not part of the forgiveness, and they're still going forward and paying with this, so they didn't pay the bill over there. And then they're going to still, okay, thank
Through
you.
you, Your Worship, so there's two different things going on. There was the Columbus Center accounts, which was what was being addressed with last year. And then this is coming from the Knights themselves. It's a personal contribution.
Okay, thank you kindly. Anyone else? Go ahead, Vicki.
Oops, I'm ready to go. Thank you. So just moving on, we'll look at childcare services. As council is aware, we are moving to the universal. We've agreed to move forward with the universal childcare moving forward period. So we opted into it in September. So there's our numbers will be slightly off at year end in terms of revenue, as the province, the feds, the province, and Huron County figure out how they're going to fund us. You may recall in the reports that they will be funding us based on our capacities, not registrations. Our budget is based on registration numbers, actual registrations, and the new funding coming in is based on our capacity numbers. So it's really unclear right now how that's going to work out. I've been, Trish and I both have been working with the finance department and Terry specifically and trying to figure out how that's going to work out. We have received money in August and again in September to start to rebate parents. We had to back up till April to start to issue those rebates based on what the province is indicating for the universal child care and things, but hopefully in 2023 we'll have all that worked out and moving forward. They've actually changed the rules a couple times now, and we're having to adjust what we're doing, and the plan was that it was 50% they would be reimbursing starting in January, and that's now changed to, I think it's 57 or 62 or something.
I'm not up to date on that one.
It's
Sorry.
something like that. It's coming at the next
coming,
meeting
okay.
for council and things. So the province is making further adjustments and moving a little bit further ahead of schedule in reaching that, ultimate universal child care. But in terms of where we're at, we're feeling like we're in very good shape with our revenue and expenses moving forward. The province is certainly, province and county, just a reminder, council, money comes from the province down through and flows through the county, so I kind of use those terms interchangeably. But the money does come, we do receive funding from them for different things, and they did come through with some funding for October, which isn't listed here, but where it was basically relief for the parents, I believe.
Yeah, probably for your
Yeah, for the
defense.
parents. Yeah, and that was
Different
something,
reasons.
yeah, and that was something that they did again last year, so.
I actually just have a, sorry, I thought you were done, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, it's okay, Your Worship. So the other thing, they were able to give us some money this year to do some enhancements over at the building as well, like we're going to be replacing a shed over there and things like that, and some fence repairs and things, so.
So I just, I'll go to you after that, Anita, I seen your hand up. So my question is, when this is handed down from the province to the county, which I understand down to us, are they dictating that we're going to do a $2 a day daycare, whatever? But when they send the funding in, are they telling us we're giving this X amount of money and no matter what it costs, this is what they're giving us, but we can only charge the end user $2? So if our staff were to go 20% over this, then that 20% overage would reflect right back on North Huron taxpayers to pay that. So if we don't run it as efficiently as the province says we can or should, and then here's the money that we have to charge. When you get into a situation like this, right, there's always give and take. We have to replace a roof on the building. We have a water tank that has to be replaced that we did not expect. Are they paying us for that, or is it just simply here's X amount of money based on 75 children, and if you go over that, you can't charge the end user, but the taxpayers? Can you just explain that? Is that how it works?
So there's various revenue streams that come in from the province and the county. So they give us operating grants, they what they call general operating grant, and then we're going to still receive that money plus this additional funding that's coming in as well. And they have different funding lines for different things, and then they have funding, what they call special funding that they give to us. I think we list it as health and safety kind of thing, but it's actually capital money that comes in that allows us to make those capital improvements to the building there and things like that. In terms of how they're working with us on the funding of the childcare spaces and things like that, they have indicated and it was in our agreement that we received earlier, is that they will identify what the maximum increase that will be tolerated per year for a fee increase on the fees. So ultimately what will happen is they're moving toward this $10 a day childcare, and then they're going to fund us the other, what would be, what we would charge above and beyond that. But keep in mind that our revenue is based on our registrations, which we are not at full capacity there because we don't have the staffing. Their funding is based on if we were fully occupied. And in addition to that, they're giving us administration dollars on top of that as well, and a cost of living. So we are anticipating additional revenue, like a surplus of revenue this year to help us deal with that. And it's different, all these different revenue streams that come in. If you look at the main child care budget, you'll see all these different funding components that come in, and it covers off on different costs. So our hope is, Your Worship, that when you look at the child care budgets for the different programs and things, really when you look at it, the actual services that we're providing with the staffing and with the children and things is what's covered. It's the costs of the operation of the building that's usually where we're short, the main child care building and things. So I think I mentioned this at a previous meeting and thing, is that maybe they don't give us an operating grant for that building, but they give us capital money, which offsets our costs in a different way. This is prior to this universal child care. For instance, like when we're replacing, the putting up new siding, fascia, soffit, having to replace the HVAC units and things like that, we're able to get funding for that from the province to do that. So it's really, they're supporting our assets and things that we would normally have to charge toward the, charge to the taxpayer. But our hope is with this new funding, under this new funding model, since it's based on our total capacity and not registration, that will certainly eliminate or reduce that amount of money that we're having to, the tax base is having to support.
Thank you very much for that, but again, I'm just gonna go back to, and then I'm gonna go to Anita and Kevin, and then I have to leave, and I'm gonna have Paul come in here. I wanna go right back to my original question. Our child care center involves everybody and everybody around us. Bottom line, end of day, we can talk about the lovey-dovey stuff from Queens Park, but they don't know where North Huron is, and they don't know our capacities, and they don't, and so anyway, long story short, at the end of the day, should a catastrophe happen, or should something go wrong, and we have an unbelievable amount of money that we have to pay to fix a building or to change something to meet regulations, who pays the bill? If the contractor sends us a quoted $7,000 and sends us a bill for $70,000, but we already know we're only getting this funding from the government, who tells us we can only charge this much. At the end of the day, who pays the bill for that? Is it the ratepayers? And I'm all for daycare, let's not get this wrong. I love daycare. I was a single guy with 2 children, so I'm not attacking daycare. I'll stand by it till hell freezes over. I'm asking the question though, who pays for that if the money doesn't flow in from the upper tiers?
If the money doesn't flow from the upper tiers, then it would be the township that would have to pay, or the ratepayers, if that's what you're asking.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much for that. So, and actually, if you don't mind, I do have to leave, so I'm just, Paul, I'm gonna, oh, sorry, we have to do a motion.
Yeah, in the absence
Sorry.
of Deputy Reeve Sipe to step in as chair, so I'd be looking for a motion for someone to chair the remainder of the meeting.
I'll make the motion that Paul takes over the head of council in the Reeves' absence.
Thank you, seconder. It will be Chris. Thank you. All in favor? Carries. Paul, step up to your first official. And I do apologize. This came up and I just have to take care of it. And we'll see you all a little later. Thank you very much, Paul. I appreciate this.
Thank you. Okay, where are we?
Yeah, so Director Ludenberger, I'd say you're good to continue on.
First question.
Yeah, we had
Oh,
some
okay.
questions.
Oh, yes, right here.
Yes, thank you very much. One of them, Vicky answered already. It was about the funding, if it was based on capacity or registration, but you said it's on capacity. What is happening with that in-between money? Like there's 90% registration, but 100% capacity paid. Do you have to pay that money back to the government? No, that's there. And is there anything known about possible expansion? Will the government support that, or are they just putting the money into existing childcare spaces right now?
Go ahead, Vic.
Okay. Through you, Councillor Heffer, or Chair Heffer. In terms of possible expansion, part of this universal child care funding program that came forward is that the government is investing in child care services, and that they're trying to attract people to the industry or to the profession. So they've been putting forth some funding packages that will pay for people to go to school to take up the profession. They are also providing incentives for people to go into that profession, and they are providing additional wage enhancement grants to boost up the salaries for that profession. We already receive a wage enhancement grant through the province or county. This would be in addition to that to bring the wages up to a certain level. That is one of the challenges that child care professionals have or are in the industry, is because at a child care facility, the wages are kind of in a, there's the wage that you're paid if you're working at a child care facility, But if you are that same person working at a school board, you're paid at a higher rate of pay. And so then that's where the province is coming in, and they're trying to raise up that rate of pay and things. I'd just like to further, did that answer your questions, Councillor Van Hittersum?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. I'd just like to touch further on children's or childcare services and things, and point out to council that they may or may not be aware of, is that at the end of the year, last year, we did have a small, we had a deficit. We were asked by the county, how much money would we need? Do we have a deficit, and how much money would we need? And I believe, I recall, they provided us $100,000 to offset that deficit. And so it did not cost the taxpayers any money at all last year for child care services whatsoever. Not even for the facility. So that's been looked after. In terms of, if you look at our revenue and expenses here on the screen, you will notice that we are doing quite well. In terms of our revenue coming in, we have brought in quite a bit of revenue above what we had budgeted, and have a surplus as of September 30th.
Okay. Any other questions? I think Councillor Faulkner.
Yes, thank you, through Chair Heffer. The answer to Anita's question was partially mine, and my only thought on that was, if they're going by capacity, you could throw in 40 extra kids for the for the Blythe area and get funding ahead of time. But no, my question was answered through Anita's question.
Okay, go ahead.
Through you, Councillor Heffer, and we did have a meeting recently. The Economic Development Officer, the CAO, and myself, and Tricia was there with the representatives from the county, and that was part of the discussion, was the enhancement or expansion, into Blythe. And the issue that we have, it's not really that it's a money issue per se. It's a workforce issue and things. So the county is aware that we would like to expand childcare into the Blythe area. But they agreed too. Like, the issue is there are no workers in that field, and I think that's where the province is trying to tackle that by providing incentives to go into that profession.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, we'll go ahead.
Yeah, so just kind of going forward with this and things. It's just, we are sitting at a 75% capacity. We continue to face the staffing shortage, and the staffing level is what's affecting our ability on the number of spaces that we can provide. I mentioned the additional funding that was received in September to offset costs, and as well as the universal child care. And then and just in keeping in mind that we do all of our programs, the revenue from all of our programs are used to offset the actual cost of the building, the main building for the child care center. And if you do go back to the slide before, you will see that even with the cost of the building being $36,000 at this point, the surplus that we have in all areas will more than adequately cover it at this point.
Chairman? Yeah, through you, Chairman Heffer. To Vicki, to get to capacity, how many more staff do we need? How many people are we short?
Through you, Your Worship, through you, Chairman Heffer, I'll have to get back to you with that one, because are you referring to the main daycare facility, childcare facility?
I was just wondering overall how many are we short, yeah.
I will have to get back to council regarding that. My apologies.
Okay, is there anything more that you want to dwell on the childcare? That's it? Okay, we'll move on to campground and trailer park.
So as council knows, or is aware, the trailer park obviously has been under development, but there was some costs initially at the beginning of the year. The campground expenses were higher than anticipated, for sure. Revenue and expenses at the campground were higher, and due to several group bookings, we did have quite a few large group bookings come in. For instance, we had like the Bruce County Campers, there was a Dittner family group that came in, anniversaries, Rutabaga Festival. There was a what's called a Road Trek Rally group that came in, and the National Square Dancers, which was actually quite beneficial for us and things. So we did bring in more revenue than anticipated and things. So that was a really great thing for the campground. The final hydro bill had not been received at the time, so there are a few more expenses to come in, but overall I think it was a good year. There is a report coming forward regarding the campground, as council recalls. Back in, I think it was January or February, we had agreed to do a second year of a pilot project for the campground, and just look at those numbers, revenue and expenses and things like that, and to see where things were at. So that will be a follow-up to council's request, and it will be at the November 7th meeting.
Okay, any questions for Vicki? Okay. Recreation and Cultural Services.
So this one under here, it has the programs, kind of a culmination or a condensed version looking at aquatics, fitness, and recreation programs, expenses and revenues. We are under budget in both categories for revenue and expenses. We were still dealing with COVID-19 last year, if you may recall. We had facility closures, and we're still operating with reduced capacities for a portion of it. However, we are rebounding and recovering from that, and more and more people are coming back to the facilities and things. So we're very optimistic that the numbers will be much higher and things like that, so.
This may have a question to you, Vicki. Do you have enough help in that department then to cover the program? We say if the people rebound back in, there's enough, you have lots of help for that?
We're struggling in aquatics. We're still struggling with filling the aquatic positions, the daytime positions. We can bring in the students to work in the evenings and the weekends. It's the daytime staff where we're struggling. Aquatic positions are very unique in that they're very unique in that you just can't walk in off the street and do the position. You have to come with several certifications just to be employed. So even a student coming in to be a lifeguard or an instructor with aquatics has to basically, lack of better words, fork out about $1,200 to $1,400 in training that they have to pay for themselves to get the certifications just to make them qualified to do the position. And where we struggle with that is that the pay for that position is equivalent to a position, say, for someone who's moving the nets on the ice and requires no certifications, and they're getting paid the same rate of pay. So I think in the future, we're going to have to look at that and how, especially this coming year, we're going to have to look at that and how we can attract people to that field and things. The aquatics area is certainly experiencing or they're struggling with staffing across the board. I mean, we've seen it or read it in the papers about even the city of Toronto and things. There's just, we're all struggling with staffing. Aquatics, so particularly, is a hard one to fill those positions. Fitness is doing well because we have the staff, they're long-term employees with us. They are part-time employees, but they have been with us for quite a while. And things, but aquatics, especially the daytime, it's really a struggle because I don't think a lot of people think of it as an actual profession to be an aquatics professional. So we need to look at different ways of recruiting and retention for those positions, I think, in the future.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Vicki?
Thank you, Chair.
Councilor?
Are there still limitations on capacity in the pool or the arena or anywhere?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm happy to say there is not.
Perfect.
We are very happy to be operating at a normal level, and our pre-COVID level, I should say. It makes a big difference, and opening up those classes also helped a lot. There was a lot of administration and involved with the restrictions, and we could only have so many, and we had to track everyone coming in and out of the building and things. So there's been some relief there in doing that. So people are happy to be back in the facilities.
I believe that.
Councillor Faulkner?
Yeah, through you, Chair. Vicki, could you just give me some an overview of the daytime aqua or daytime pool usages? Is that like for AquaFit? Is for like adults or kids or?
So through you, Mr. Chairman. So during the daytime, we have a different clientele during the daytime than we do in the evening. So during the daytime, we start the morning off at 6 in the morning with lane swimmers coming in. And then we go into doing the AquaFit programs and things. We have a really strong AquaFit program, which attracts adults and older adults to the program and things. Men and women come in and use the program and stuff. We will do water walking with that AquaFit program as well. We also have homeschoolers that come in and rent the facility, and we provide lessons during that time. We do private lessons during the day as well. We also have public swims during the day, like we'll do like parent and tots as well as another lane swim, because we tried to provide that variety for the different people who are going to be using it and convenience and things like that as well. We also have groups such as community living that come in and rent the facility to do their programming as well, and then we basically then head into lessons in the evening and things, and we have the swim club as well.
So just for clarification, is the shortage in the lifeguarding, life-saving portion, or is it in the instructing of the AquaFit, or is that the same person?
It's not the same person, and it is both and things, but it's the daytime staff that we're having the issue with, because a lot of times these positions are filled by youth, and so, but the youth are in school during the day, and that's where we're struggling with the daytime positions and things. So we need to look at how we can get, basically it would be an adult that could come in and do the programming and things. So the qualifications for a lifeguard, there's basic qualifications for that, but then to become an instructor, you have to have even more qualifications to do that. And then if you're teaching AquaFit, that's another qualification on top of that. That's even in addition to the $1,200 or $1,400 I was talking about. I was just talking about to have your advanced courses in order to become a lifeguard, that they're paying out the $1,200 to $1,400.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Mr. McCready.
Through you, Chair Heffer. To Vicki, can I back up one slide? I missed a question I wanted to ask in the campgrounds.
Sure.
When does it actually close?
Pardon, I can't hear you.
When does it close for camping?
Campground closes on September 30th.
September 30th?
Yes. And through you, Mr. Chairman, The reason for that is because of the ice going in, and the ice starts up on October 1st, and us having to go into shifts and deal with the ice usage and things like that.
Is there still a camper there? I was just curious.
There's a camper there now.
Yep.
I can look into that and see what's involved with that.
Been there for quite a while. There was 2 trailers there, they finally down to 1, but
I will look into it and see.
Thank you. Okay, are we done with that portion of it? Ready to move on to Recreation Administration?
With respect to Recreation Administration, we're slightly under on revenue and expenses. We have been down, or we have been under on expenses and things. With the COVID situation at the beginning of the year, we weren't providing evening coverage for the usage of, in the office for the usage of the facilities and things. So that's affected that number, but we are pretty well on target. It's only affected us slightly.
Any questions for that from anybody? Okay, thank you. We'll move on to community centers.
Community centers with revenue and things, it is slightly higher. And community centers being all of the facilities. It's not just the Blythe Community Hall. It's more of a rounded things. But as you can see, is that our revenue, we have a good portion of our revenue in. Our expenses are a bit lower. But keep in mind, this is a seasonal operation and things. So as of September 30th, we didn't have the ice up and running, and wasn't at full capacity on staffing or anything like that, because as you recall, we've been having a staffing shortage, so that's reflected in the expenses as well, and things. So it wasn't actually until mid-September that we started to get staffing in place and started to be able to deal with that issue and things. So that's why we're under, some of the reasons why we're under in expenses and things. And again, facility closure early on because of COVID.
I have a question.
Questions? Go ahead.
Through you,
Councillor
Chair. We're not capturing the portion of revenue that we're either paying ourselves or foregoing for the community, for the hall in Wingham. Is that captured somewhere else?
It's in there.
Oh, it's already in there?
You mean for the Columbus Center
Yeah,
Hall?
yeah.
That's part of the community centers.
So the leasing portion is already in this?
Yeah.
Okay.
The community centers category is kind of all encompassing. It encompasses the Blythe District Community Center, which is the arena and the hall down there. It also encompasses the North Huron West Cast complex in East Wallmanosh, but the complex in its entirety, including the Columbus Center.
Any other questions? Okay, we'll go to Ec Development. Thank you very much, Vicki.
Dimitri's coming up. I thought it'd be good for him to.
Go
Hello,
ahead.
council. So, I think this was just a general overview, this sheet. So the next 2 slides do go into each of these in more detail. I guess what I'll say on this slide is, so we are at 75% between the actual and what's budgeted for this year. And what we're projecting is that we'll likely end under budget or right on budget. So just going through kind of line by line, for the RED grant and SLED grant, those top two columns there, those projects are, the RED grant is for the community guide. Denise or our community engagement coordinator is going through that right now, and that should be done by year end, so that will be spent. But again, it's fully funded by the grant, so it'll be half of that is funded by the grant, so we'll be getting $14,000 worth of a project for 6.8. The SLED grant, also, the goal is to have that spent by the end of this year. I believe there's some supply issues with components of it, but it is moving along. So I'll go down special projects, Hutton Heights. So the idea with that 56,000 there is that when there is the sale of the Hutton Heights with whatever applicant or developer builder is going to be going forward with that project, then that's when that 56 will be covered through the sale of those lands. And then I think we can go to the next slide.
Were there any questions for Dimitri before we go on? Okay, go ahead.
So you'll see there's a difference between the actual, the year-to-date actual and the budget on advertising and promotion. We haven't been billed yet for the 15,000 from the Blythe Festival, so that will be within the next month or so. We'll get that coming through, and that'll put that right at budget. We're under budget on the website. I've looked at a couple things we could do next year, a couple different tools. I think we're going to leave everything as is with the website. It's functioning fairly well and gives us all of the abilities that we want to have with it. So we're not going to make any changes to that going forward. The community improvement plan, we have one approved application in this year, so we'll have to carry forward some of that, at least $10,000 worth. And from, I don't know how many were approved last year. I don't know if there were any, so I'll need to look into that, but that's why.
CIPs last year, there was one.
There was one?
Yep.
Okay. So what's likely happened is that project hasn't been finished yet, so we haven't paid out that project. I think they have 18 months to complete, so once that person, so we'll actually have to carry that forward as well into 2023. And then just the other difference there at the very bottom for other, that's just wages, supplies, memberships, workshops, all of that. Over the next 2 months, we'll likely get up to, we're projecting that we'll get right up to that 82,000. So pretty straightforward, pretty much on budget for everything. There will be some changes going into 2023, but that's, I guess, not to be discussed right now. Any questions?
Seeing none, go ahead.
Yep.
That takes us to the last slide. So staff will be monitoring the revenue and expenses closely to the year end. And from some of the comments that were made, projects that are not complete, there'll be a report coming to maybe possibly transfer the unspent funds into reserves so that they can be budgeted next year and finance next year's the project if it happens in 2023. As projects are complete, the transfers to and from reserves will be completed. And staff, I believe, are working on their 2023 budget. And the first meeting will be December the 16th.
December 16th, okay.
Is that good?
So, okay, any other questions for Terry at all? So you said December 16th, right?
Yes, that's the budget meeting, the first meeting for the budget.
Thank you.
So there's a motion there.
Where I don't.
I can read it.
Go
Yeah,
ahead.
so now that we're through the slide deck, looking for a motion that the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby receives the year-to-date budget presentation presented October 28th, 2022 for information purposes.
Anita? Second. Chris? Okay, please raise your hands. Oh, passes.
I think Councillor Van Henderson has a...
Question, sorry?
Can we have a little break?
Yes, so the only item we have left is the strategic plan update from Dwayne, but if council wants to take a break, I will leave the live stream running here just because it's being very finicky, so we'll take about a 5-minute break and then we'll resume with Dwayne's PowerPoint.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Council. I'm going to be going.
Thank you very much.
I'm leaving.
Terry.
Thanks, Terry.
Have a good rest of your meeting. Thank you. We'll see you when I get back.
Best news.
That is me.
To answer your question, it's a bit confusing, like,
Yeah, it's just,
takes a little, it's
yeah.
like, process.
Yeah, no, it answered my question. Thank you.
Bye, Dwayne.
Have a great trip.
Yeah,
And
thank you so
very
much.
much.
Yeah. Hope everything went well. What's that? Hope everything went well.
Yeah, Chris is
Try to fill them in as much as possible. So, I just leave my computer here or whatever.
Maybe if you don't mind just putting the password, I don't, so he's all set up,
Yeah.
but just.
It's in my to-do folder and I've got that in there, all the passwords that I have. So I'll leave the computer in his office and then whenever I come back.
Just mark
all
it.
my files are in there, everything is, so he can, and then there's one of my files, I'll just okay.
Came in yesterday and had the opportunity to meet folks, so that was nice, kind of get acquainted.
That's good. I thought he was here, but I guess not.
No, we told him about it, but he's actually gone to Sudbury, him and his wife Colleen are going to Sudbury because there's a trailer. What I understand, and don't quote me on this, that so they brought a load down, and the buddy of his is bringing, they have 2 trucks, bringing the other one to Sudbury, and they're going to Sudbury today, and then they're bringing down the next load.
Okay,
So
cool. Awesome.
So it's quite a 12.
Well, that's
Well, he told us it's a 12-hour drive, but with the load and everything,
Wow.
it took him 15 to get here.
Oh.
He said he had to stop like so many,
oh,
like,
I bet.
like all the gas
Okay.
stations. He said because he was hauling,
Oh, man.
a big load.
Oh, thank you.
so-
Excuse me.
But yeah.
Yeah, wow.
Oh, go ahead, Kevin.
Okay. Well, nice to meet you all. We'll see you again.
For sure.
Yeah. Bye, everyone.
First time in that seat or what?
Yeah. Only thing I've been is doing the museum
Yeah.
sometimes, and I just found out, oh, ding dong. Oh, well, gotta get used to it anyways, and whatnot, it'll come.
Yeah.
Just the lights I couldn't see here and whatnot, I just gotta get used to it when it's a lot better with this on, just for seeing what's going on right here, eh?
Yeah, true.
Because there's a light coming up through there, eh? You used to hear Bernie talking
I feel
about
like,
that.
I feel like that could be, whatever.
Yeah, so who's doing the strategic plan? I think it's Dwayne?
Yeah, Dwayne's gonna go through
Yeah.
it. I don't know if I'm gonna stay up for it. I'm gonna ask him, but
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, because that's a,
Yeah, so looking good. I'll be coming in talking to you sometime when it's not going to interfere with anything you're doing and whatnot. Just some questions about
Yeah, for sure.
Heights A and
Yeah.
whatnot. and whatnot. So-
I know Anita wants to talk to me too today about it and the expression of interest and stuff, so,
Yeah.
yeah.
So will you be doing that after, or
Doing what?
like talking to her after?
Oh,
about
yeah.
that?
If you guys both want to come down to my
Well,
office.
it'd really be good, like,
Yeah, yeah, why
if
don't-
I could,
Yeah, why don't
with her,
we go down, come down to the office and we'll sit and,
Oh, really appreciate that.
yeah, we'll chat about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right on, right on.
But the number itself is still being worked on. The actual.
Would you like me to stay for the strategic planning portion as well?
It's up to you. It's an overall, it's happening across the.
So, Cars, what do I have,
What
what do I have to do here with this? Like to start Dwayne off, what do I have to say now?
You know what,
Don't read my lips, okay?
No, because of
Kevin,
My allergies. I just couldn't see where, then my lights came on, okay. So I'll just ask him.
He would say in council that he's giving the work.
Oh, I didn't see it, yeah.
Don't take it that way.
But I thought we got part right there. Thank you. This motion goes. Just be patient.
Oh, yeah, no.
Going well for Remembrance Days?
I hope so.
Yeah, not sure?
Oh, yeah. We did this year, the first time we did a mail-out for parking instead of door-to-door. Once I got my parking chair to accept it, she's setting her ways. I think it went well.
Changes are,
The class is enough. Probably $600 just to do that. Paid 17 cents a letters. We have envelopes printed, inside envelope printed, and a little insert. I think our capture was 1,200, I think.
yeah.
Oh, well, all the money goes in the same spots. And it's indoors this year, that's good.
Yeah, good.
So, Mr. Affer, you're behaving yourself over there.
See where I was? You see that, like, it's coming in here. Now I know what Bernie was talking. Get down low while take it away from it.
Who's that guy talking to Kevin?
Well, that's the new guy.
Is it?
Yeah, Mitch Wright. See, he wasn't there that day.
Oh. Oh, I got up too early today. Gosh. So the elevator was there for you?
Yeah, it was sitting there waiting this time.
It was idling.
Took forever to get out. It's like people were playing with me at the other end.
We got a button.
Who was? Okay, that makes sense then, I guess. I'm just glad there wasn't a fire.
Good thing you didn't close it and go off for a break and leave you there.
Leave me there? Yeah. I would have gone in the corner.
Oh. Oops, get back there. Strategic plan.
I usually do first.
I never got onto my iPad until halfway through the day yesterday. Reset my password.
You do have one here, so you can.
Okay, folks. Okay, we'll let our CAO Evans to do our strategic plan update, 5.4.
Super. Thank you very much for your time. And a lot of this I think we have covered already through our year-to-date report, but this is really just a high-level overview and summary in terms of where we're at. So just in terms of as background, as council recall, you took office back in 2018. And in 2019, we undertook the development of a strategic plan. Council adopted the strategic plan, and the time period for it is 2020 to 2023. So we do still have, one more year on that strategic plan. And as you're aware, the strategic plan adopted by council sets your objectives and priorities, and we use that as staff to guide our daily work in terms of, carrying out what it is that council wishes us to do. In addition to the strategic plan, there was a service delivery review that was completed, and council adopted the service delivery review, and so there's some items from there as well that staff are working on. And finally, there's some other tasks that have occurred over the course of the time period that weren't specifically identified in the strategic plan, but council asked for us to carry out and undertake some tasks for those items. So those are incorporated into this as well. So just as far as I'll call it 2022 key highlights, in terms of kind of where we're at we're getting towards the end of 2022. So council, Hutton Heights has been a priority, and certainly that's moving forward. Redevelopment of the former trailer park is moving forward. We're moving forward with council's decision regarding the dam. Council made a decision to end the OPP policing contract, and we're now going into the OPP billing model for the entire municipality, which was previously discussed. Council has also given us direction regarding council chamber space, and again, we're working that forward. We're currently engaging with an architect to get the design work for the council space completed. And then we will be seeking some funds as part of the 2023 budget to undertake those renovations. As well, and as previously indicated, we've completed the sale of the airport. The airport itself was done last year. The airport agriculture and woodlot lands is now being finalized. Council has provided direction regarding the future of the former Blythe Public Works and Fire property. And again, that's an item where, as council will recall, there's 3 buildings on that property. 2 are being demolished, and then we'll be making the balance into a municipal parking lot. So again, we will be seeking funds as part of the 2023 budget to follow through with that directive. The official plan for the municipality, the 5-year review, has been completed and adopted and is in place. We've also in 2022 done, and it's best defined, I think, as redefining our economic development approach, whereby, as council will recall, Denise, who was working in the recreation department, has moved over into the administrative department, and in terms of her role as community engagement coordinator. And we've also brought on an economic development officer. So economic development officer and Dimitri in particular are working together to move forward the economic development for the municipality as a whole. And I think that's going very well. We also had some finance policies that there were some policies that we need to be created, but we also had some policies that were getting outdated. So those were brought forward for council, and council approved them. Of course, in 2022, we've just completed the election, so that has been a draw on staff resources, completing that process. And as well, we currently have the accessibility ramp construction project underway that was talked about previously. In terms of the challenges in 2022, so as you're aware, in terms of we've had some staff vacancies, so we've had to manage those staff vacancies. We've had to take some duty and responsibilities and divide them up among existing staff members to maintain our operations. So that has had a little bit of a drawdown in terms of the work that we've been able to complete. Labor force recruitment, as is and continues to be a challenge, is certainly something that at a staff level we've been talking about extensively. We'll get to this a little bit later, but Dimitri is looking at workforce development, and I've been working with Alyssa, who HR, in terms of different strategies, different approaches for recruitment. One good thing, I guess, is that we're not in the minority in terms of labor force recruitment challenges. All municipalities that I interact with are having the same challenges, and as well in terms of in the private sector as well. So we're not unique in that regard. We have had increased project costs, which has already been talked about in terms of what we're seeing in terms of through our tendering process. Things are coming in higher than what we're anticipating. Recovery from COVID, we're moving forward with that recovery process. We do still see some lingering elements, if you want to call it that, from the COVID-19. So there's still some things that are still, but as time goes forward and as we continue, we're working those through. It's having less of an impact on us. There are still some here and there, but from an operational perspective in terms of our staffing, sometimes, as you can appreciate, we do have policies that we do follow if somebody does encounter COVID. And then as of late, in terms of during the election time period, there's been a number of projects that have been, I'll call it, put on pause or hold, because they're items that we do need council direction on, but we're not able to bring those to council because of the lame duck period. So certainly, once we get the new council up in place and going, there will be a number of items that have currently been paused, and we will be bringing those forward. So there will be a bit of an influx. We will manage that. We don't want to overwhelm individuals, but there are a number of projects that we do need to get council direction on. So just getting more into the actual strategic plan, there were 6 goals that have been identified, and the first one was economy. And the economy goal the council established was to build a stronger economy through residential growth, retail, commercial, industrial development, tourism, and thriving agriculture. And in terms of, there were 6 goals that council identified. 6 action items that council developed. In addition, there's 3 service delivery related items, and then there's other, which I just referred to as council priority, which we'll touch on briefly. But just in terms of our first 2 goals or action items that we established, the one was to improve the timeliness and efficiency of our development approvals process. That is still something from a staff's perspective that we continue to work on, but as you will recall, we did bring forward a site plan control bylaw that was adopted by council, whereby council has now delegated that approval authority to staff, which enables us to work more efficiently and in a more timely manner in terms of with the development community to get those developments approved and get them their building permits, essentially. In terms of the second item on there, in terms of, this is dealing with inventory of our properties that we have. This is an exercise actually that we have been working on, or this council has been working on, in terms of looking at our assets. What properties do we have? How can we better utilize them? How can we make them work for us as a municipality? So there is a slide deck actually that has been put together by staff, and we have used that slide deck in terms of marketing the municipality and what properties we have available that may be of interest to developers. So that is a slide deck that, again, has been used for that purpose. Now that the official plan has been updated, there has been some changes to some designations on some properties and some zonings. So what we're doing right now is updating that slide deck and making sure that it's current and up to date. And then that's the slide deck, for example, that Dimitri will be using as we receive inquiries from developers. So in terms of our next 2 items, with respect to, again, Dimitri in particular is working, relatively new with us in terms of earlier this spring, but certainly working to giving advice, comments, feedback in terms of how to position ourselves for future growth development opportunities. And certainly you've seen some of that, as you recall, at a previous, maybe the last council meeting. He's undertaken a job analysis review. So he's getting a handle on who we are as municipality and how to position us to move forward. And further to that, in terms of we were successful with receiving a rural economic development funding grant to design and promote a North Huron or a North Huron experience in a tour. And that's certainly something that we touched on a little bit earlier, but Denise is kind of leading that, doing some design work for that. And again, that doesn't cost us anything, or sorry, we are paying some of the, we're contributing some money towards that, but we do have some financial assistance in terms of moving that forward. Again, part of the recovery for COVID in terms of bringing people back, getting people back into the community, and providing and showing them what we have to offer. The airport, again, we've already touched on the airport, but that council directed and asked, to look at, what do we do with the airport, where do we go, and council has given us that direction, and as you're aware, we have disposed of that asset. In terms of the next 2 items, community improvement plan, that's been touched on, but certainly we need to transfer, as part of the 2023 budget, 10,000 of the unspent money forward into the 2023 budget to honor or for the commitment with respect to the project that's been approved. There is there will be 30,000 unspent. Certainly from a staff's perspective, we're recommending continuation of the community improvement program into 2023. Again, that'll be a council decision. But at a minimum, we do have to commit to 10,000 to honor that commitment from 2022. The museum project, which is, well, the next item actually is with respect to a visitor information center and a physical location and a kiosk. This item has been talked about in and out of with respect to the museum project. There have been some developments, I guess, would be the way to frame it with respect to that particular project. So we will be bringing forward an update to council just in terms of kind of where we're at with that project. And as you will recall, there was a conversation in terms of establishing a museum fundraising committee. One of the reasons in terms of that fundraising initiative, from a staffing perspective, certainly we did not have a director of finance to support that work and that committee. But as you're aware, we have onboarded our director of finance, who will actually be starting with us on Monday. So we're quite excited about that. So that will be something that will need to be talked about, considered with the new council. But before you do that, we certainly will provide you with an update in terms of conversations that have taken place around that. So the next item that council identified was the Hutton Heights lands. I won't go into any detail around that. I think we've already, council's aware and where we're at and what's happening on that particular initiative. In terms of the next two items, they actually were items that came out of the service delivery review. The one item that came forward or was recommended that we consider doing an annual maintenance fee for building permits. And the whole idea here is that if we were to put in annual maintenance fee, it would basically be an incentive for individuals to get their projects completed and get their building permits closed. We have a number of building permits that people have taken out and they're working on projects, but they haven't actually completed them. And once the project is completed and the building permit is closed, that's when we see the increase in our assessment from a municipality's perspective, and then it subsequently increases our revenue. And we have a number of permits that are open. Mind you, having said that, Nancy, who's our chief building official, has been able to get some closed. So, I mean, we're making progress on that. But if we were to consider an annual maintenance fee whereby your permit is open for 12 months or 18 months or whatever the time period is, and if you want to keep it open, you have to pay a fee. The idea being that people won't want to pay the fee and they're going to want to get their project completed. So that's certainly something that, and again, that came out of the service delivery review recommendation because they identified that number of open building permits we had. So certainly as part of, that's something to be looked at in 2023. The other item that they identified through the review process was the Wingham Trailer Park property. And certainly from a councilor's perspective, you looked at that property, you know, considered options, and basically council moved forward with selling it. And as you're aware, that property is now in private ownership with the development underway. So we've completed that action item as well. In terms of council priority item, the way is the A2A development or the maintenance estates property that we have. What I can share with you is that there is interest, activity around that property, but from confidentiality perspective, that's the extent of what I can share. From a staff's perspective, we continue to maintain contact. The property is listed for sale. I do dialogue back and forth with the agent, actually just last week. So there is some interest around that particular property, but from a municipality's perspective, you know, we don't own the property. We have no jurisdiction over the property. So all we can do is support and facilitate and assist in potential future development of it. But it certainly is, from a staff's perspective, still something that we're continuing, you know, we're keeping our pulse on it, maybe best way to describe it. But there's only so much we can do as a municipality around that project. But we're certainly doing what we can to support and in hopes of facilitating that moving forward. And the last item under economic
portfolio, I guess, is in terms of coordinating local economic development initiatives with the county. Again, this was one of the recommendations that came out of the service delivery review. Now that we have our economic development more clearly defined, I guess, the economic development officer and the community engagement coordinator, there are a number of meetings that take place at the county level. So certainly those two staff members are engaged in those meetings and dialoguing back and forth with county staff. So our two economic development people are strategically collaborating with the county on areas of common interest. And in doing so, we're very cognizant and very mindful in terms of that, you know, we're not overlapping in terms of what the economic development officer is doing versus the community engagement work that Denise is doing. So it's not, we very much are mindful not to, you know, we want to use our resources, our staff resources effectively, efficiently, and we don't want to, we want to be involved and be there and participate in discussions, but if both of them don't need to be there, both of them are not there. So our next category was in terms of community as a whole, and again, from a strategic plan perspective, our goal is to be a vibrant and welcoming community that is proud of its roots. Volunteerism has strong arts and cultural presence and supports community initiatives and special events. And council identified 5 action items with respect to advancing this goal. The first was in terms of one of the items that we talked about was developing a more efficient events approval policy process and marketing community events in North Huron. So as you're aware, earlier this year, economic development staff brought forward a special events policy that council has adopted, and that policy is being used with event, you know, assisting and supporting events and projects, I guess, in the community. So it's a valuable tool, and it certainly is assisting staff in terms of, you know, that economic aspect to it. As much as it's economic development, it really is about providing a service to the community. Next item, develop a process or program to recognize volunteers for their contributions to the community. This is certainly an item that, you know, to be worked on. It was identified as a long-term item, and so there's certainly something from a staff's perspective that we'll be looking at for 2023, and I'm anticipating that you will see a report. There will need to be some direction from council regarding this at some point. Next item was to investigate opportunities to be recognized as a youth-friendly community. Again, this was a longer-term item, and as you remember, in terms of we had short-term, medium-term, and long-term. So this was an item to be looked at and then considered kind of at the end of the strategic plan, which again, in terms of 2023. So that's certainly something, you know, we'll have to seek direction in terms of if the council that will be our incoming council, in terms of certainly this is identified by the existing council as priority. One of the things we may do is seek confirmation that this continues to be an item that you wish staff to work on. 2 other items. The first is with respect to prioritizing accessibility in the township's buildings and services. And certainly, you know, we've been moving this forward. You know, in terms of, there's, as we all know, for example, the ramp that is going out front, again, is to provide accessibility to town hall services. And as well, the Wingham Fire Hall washroom renovation project is certainly another project that we're moving forward with in terms of, for accessibility purposes, to advance that. So we continue as we go forward. When we're, from a staff's perspective, we continue to incorporate and look at projects through an accessibility lens, whether it's a renovation project or a new project, because we want to ensure, and as you're aware, we have to achieve AODA compliance by 2025. So, you know, we have to continue to advance this, and
And again, this will be a conversation with council as part of the 2023 budget process in terms of what we allocate to. We have a number of accessibility projects that we do need to advance, and the question is what resources are we going to allocate to it as part of 2023? Bearing in mind you have 2023 and 2024, so a couple of years there to move things forward. Building on that, there's some funding programs out there. We're aware of one right now. We applied in 2020. We were successful. That's the money that's being used for the Wingham Fire Hall, correct?
No,
That's
the
the ramp.
2020 is for the ramp and
The
the
ramp,
3 sets
yeah.
of accessible doors.
So we are planning to make an application to get the funding dollars that are available to allow us to continue to advance accessibility. It's not going to cover with the costs and everything, you know, in terms of it's not going to cover all of the costs, but certainly anything we can get through any funding program will certainly assist us in terms of moving accessibility requirements forward, right? And last item here is in terms of a community safety and well-being plan. In terms of, this was something that council has, was brought forward, council has adopted it. And as part of advancing this particular action item, council has provided some funding through the community safety and well-being plan towards the Northern Huron Connection Center, which is the initiative that last council meeting before, when Ryan Erb came and gave us an update on this particular initiative and this particular project. So, you know, certainly again, moving that item forward. So moving on in terms of our next goal, that was to be fiscally sustainable, transparent, and forward-thinking municipality that worked with its residents and stakeholders through communications and communication engagement. And actually, there's 9 action items that are being worked on here. The first is with respect to high-speed internet, and as you recall, there was some money through the SWIFT program, or we were successful, I guess. Basically, that has enabled for the expansion of some high-speed internet services into actually the eastern portion, or the portion of the East Wawanosh, sorry. Yeah, a portion there. So again, there's still more work to be done here, but you know, through conversations and discussions with the county, at least we were able to move it a little bit, move the bar. Again, another item that we have under this category is accessibility in terms of governance and modernization, and this is more in the context of things like our website, for example, where we want to ensure that, you know, we want, in terms of providing that service to the public, in terms of that modernization, that we're able to provide information, make information available, and information that is accessible for the public as a whole. And this is being facilitated partly through the township's new website. In terms of support, the Association of Municipalities of Ontario advocacy efforts for support of rural community needs. So as you will recall, back in 2021, the Reeve, Deputy Reeve, and myself, we appeared as a delegation at the 2021 virtual AMO conference. We had a delegation at that time with the Minister of Solicitor General, and the issue that was raised that Council had an interest in was with respect to joint and several liability. So we certainly, the Minister is certainly aware of, and the province is still continuing to deal with that one, I guess. And I know that we're not the only municipality. There are, just through conversations, I know of several other municipalities that are currently dealing and have concerns with respect to this. But in addition to that, actually going back to Vicky's earlier comment with respect to childcare, and so as Vicky's indicated, we recently met with county staff to talk about the impact that the labor shortage for daycare is having on our local economy. We certainly know, and as Councillor Van Hiddesum is aware, and Councillor Faulkner, the hospital, for example, is being indirectly impacted or directly impacted by lack of daycare spaces. So, you know, and the county's certainly aware of it. We're certainly aware of it at staff level. But based on our conversations at the county level, it seems that the issue may be further up the chain at the provincial level. So one of the things, and I've been talking to one of my other CAO colleagues in another municipality who's dealing with the same issue. And so what I'm contemplating and thinking is in terms of that we consider a delegation at the Roma conference, and to bring it to the attention of the province. Certainly the county's indicated that they will assist us in terms of bringing that forward for delegation. They will provide other information. Again, the other CAO in particular that I've just had recent conversations with indicated as well that he would be willing to work with me to move this forward. So that's something that in the next month or so, in terms of working on it, the Roma conference is in January. So there will be call out soon for delegations. So I think that's certainly something on my radar to look at doing. Because if you're aware, and as Vicky's indicated earlier, in terms of the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Education and Daycare actually are under the same ministry, but we have a different pay structure for our daycare staff than for our Ministry of Education or the EAs at the school board. So it's interesting from my perspective that we have a service where for ECE educators under one ministry, but we have kind of two different structures. So I just provincially, I think we need to, I'm sure the province is aware of it. I'm just not sure that they actually fully appreciate and understand the impact that it's having on us at a local level. So I think we need to push it up the line, and you know, we'll get our MPP involved in that. I think we need to push that forward. In terms of our next item, develop a communication strategy. This is something that there's certainly been discussions held, by SMT in terms of developing a communication strategy, and this is communication all forms of our communication, whether it's our signage, our presence on our website, and all that. So the plan is to move this forward in 2023, and as part of that, and this is what Dimitri and Denise and myself in terms of still working on, in terms of what that's going to be and how much from a budget perspective we'd be looking for as part of the 2023 budget. Communication strategy can be done completely by a third-party consultant external. But earlier conversations maybe is that, maybe we can do more of, see what we can do in-house, and where is it that we're lacking that we would need to bring in a potential somebody with more expertise in that area. So we're going to flesh that out before we bring forward the first budget for you in December. So in terms of updating the township's digital processes, this is, as council's aware, we applied for and were successful at getting some provincial funding to hire some records management assistants, and that has been a very big project. And staff are continuing to move forward with digitizing our records and getting them into what's known as Laserfiche. So again, that's been a very ambitious project, but the benefits, as we have seen significant time-saving benefits from it, in terms of our record searching is like a fraction of the time that it has been in the past. So that will continue to move. But further to that, in terms of from a staff's perspective, we need to remain open to consider other digital processes, other things that we can do. And going back to in terms of payment options and things like that, in terms of maybe another module to our website that allows for people, to do more payments, more online payments, I'll call it. We know that that's kind of, the times of going into town hall to pay your taxes. People want to pay their taxes at 9 o'clock at night, and town hall's not open. So making sure that people's ability to do those payment options, for example, make sure that that's available. In terms of implementing professional development plans for staff, as council will recall, we've moved forward. We implemented a new HR manual. And the implementation is continuing. As we have been working with the manual, there are some things that we do need to, we will be bringing back what I refer to as a housekeeping amendment. And it's just things that we've observed, things perhaps not as clear as perhaps they should be. So we'll be bringing back an amendment to the HR manual for council's consideration. So, and it's more, again, housekeeping items, no major deviations, but just more clarifications, I guess, just to a large part. The next item, action item under this category was to evaluate the current size and structure of council. So as you're aware, we brought that forward to council. Council decided to maintain status quo, which is fine, and so we considered that project completed. Through the service delivery review, it was suggested that we undertake an IT review, which we applied for. We were successful at receiving funding. We completed that review. And basically that IT service delivery review basically gave us comments and feedback, for the most part, in terms of we, as you're aware, have third-party contractor continue it for IT services. The question was, is that appropriate service delivery for us, or should we be hiring somebody in-house, or should we be looking at, shared arrangement? And as council's aware, the service delivery review concluded that our service structure was appropriate for us, for our needs. But they did recommend some other items in terms of changes, recommendations, and we have been implementing those. We've been working with Continuit, who's our third-party provider, and we've been building some of that into the IT budget. So we're continuing to move that IT forward, and it's certainly important as we move forward with things like governance and our modernization practices. So we need that hardware, we need that built into our system. Another item was to replace the recreation management software system. We have purchased the software, and it has been installed and is currently being implemented. Infrastructure was another goal that was established, and the goal there is to be municipality with well-maintained and thoughtfully planned infrastructure. And essentially, there's 5 items in this related to this goal that council identified. The first, and we've talked about this already, is to replace the current standpipe in Wingham. So as been previously indicated, that's something that will be awarded and complete in 2023. Develop a fleet replacement schedule that was presented to council for all the departments, so we consider that completed. Complete infrastructure mapping of all infrastructure. This is something, again, where we were successful in receiving some funding from the province to assist us in hiring an individual who is inputting data into our asset management database. The funding for that particular position does expire in early 2023. So from a staff's perspective, in terms of continuing on in terms of maintaining and getting things to where they need to be, including funds in 2023 budget to continue on with the work that is currently underway. It certainly has been beneficial in terms of moving it forward. So building on that in terms of core, with respect to asset management, the core assets have been completed. The non-core asset work has started, and we need to continue to move that forward in accordance with the regulation that is in place. In terms of our surplus municipal infrastructure and assets, as indicated earlier, You know, we have been looking over the last 4 years at our assets, as council's aware, in terms of the Armories building. It was to the state in terms of, the condition was such that we demolished it. The airport council agreed in terms of selling environmental asset work. We've completed that for the Blythe Public Works property. Council has given us direction around that, and we have direction around the Wingham Trailer Park. We will be seeking, from a staff's perspective, in terms of, again, carrying out the work that council has indicated, funds to demolish the buildings at the former Blythe Public Works property to create the parking lots. So, in terms of services, and not surprisingly, this is our largest category, given the nature of our business. Our goal is to offer high-quality and well-balanced services that create a sense of belonging, support community well-being, promote safety, and encourage healthy and active lifestyles. So, not surprisingly, we have 12 action items that we have in this particular category. So the first is to continue to be involved in physician recruitment efforts. As you're aware, Councillor Van Hittersum sits on the Physician Recruitment Committee and has been instrumental with respect to that committee. And as just to give you a heads up, for the 2023 budget, from a staff's perspective, we will be recommending continuing support of the work of that committee. Next is to continue to deliver public education and fire prevention and fire service programs. This item was slowed in the last couple of years because of COVID, but now that COVID restrictions have lifted, the fire department, in particular the fire prevention officer, things are resuming and resuming fairly quickly in terms of school visits to the fire hall are now taking place, Belgrave Fall Fair, supporting other community groups at events. There's, as you're aware, in terms of the firemen's breakfast have resumed, the fish fries have started back up. Fire inspections are now, it was kind of on an as-needed basis, or I'll call it emergency basis, but now fire inspections are getting back, I don't want to say back to what they're coming back to what their previous pre-COVID levels were. And the vulnerable occupancy and fire drills and inspections are taking place. So certainly, you know, as this particular action item was slowed for a couple of years, but we're certainly, now that COVID restrictions are lifting, this is certainly getting more back on track, and certainly in terms of 2023, it'll continue on that path. In terms of review service agreements with municipalities, as you're aware, there were discussions ongoing with respect to a cross-border agreement for water and sewer services. Those discussions ended in 2022, in large part or partly because we went into lame duck, so that could not. Again, maybe the pause button kind of on that. So that particular item, you know, really advanced earlier this year. So that's certainly something that we'll be bringing back to the new council and seeking direction as to how you want to proceed and where you want to go with it, that item. Conduct a service review. As we're aware, that was completed, and which is part of some of the action items that we have in our report. Support local housing initiatives. The county, and I believe Reed Bailey has indicated that we are on I call the docket for affordable housing project. Goderich first, Clinton, Central Huron, no, South Huron second, and then we're third. But we have certainly caught the attention, if you want to call it that, of the county, and they have agreed that there is some work to be done here, and they're going to be assisting and working on that. In addition to that, though, in terms of our discussions with developers, you know, if there's an opportunity for them to consider incorporate affordable housing into their projects, that certainly would be beneficial to us as a municipality. The next item, exploring the feasibility of expanding daycare services in Blythe. I won't hash this one. I think we're all aware what the situation is there. From us, there is certainly a need given our wait list at our daycare. There is certainly a much-needed daycare need, but what has delayed us again is the labor situation. So we'll continue to work on that initiative. Next item is exploring the feasibility of relocating the Blythe Library to a location where the township is not paying rent. This is certainly an item that is on our radar. What we have been, from the staff's perspective, looking at in investigating is combining the daycare expansion with the library. That's a natural together piece. So we'll have to assess, I guess, in the very near future in terms of, do we move forward with the library relocation in the absence of the daycare, or do we keep the two kind of together? I'm not sure yet. So I'm certainly, any comments, and well, we'll have that conversation at the council level at some point in terms of moving that forward. But I know at the county level that they very much like the idea of the library and the daycare being housed in the same area, partly because there's the early on learning the early on program, and the early on program is administered through the library system, or they use library. So rather than them offering that program on the main street of Blythe, if the daycare and the early on program were housed together, it's more efficient for them. But that's just the county's input on that at this point. They're certainly open and receptive to housing those two under the same roof. It's a question of how we want to move that forward. Develop a recreation master plan. As council is aware, this was completed and presented to council. Council accepted the master plan, and staff are proceeding. In 2022, we implemented, or moving, I'm not sure if we're done yet, but we're certainly implementing the low-hanging fruit, I'll call it, out of that master plan. But there will need, in terms of in terms of some of the other items in that recreation master plan, in terms of moving them forward, we will be needing and looking for some funding for 2023 to move some of the, I'll call it, the larger pieces forward. Service Delivery Review recommended that we look at our approach to customer service, which we have done in terms of we brought forward a new customer service policy and a complaints policy. Those have been adopted by council, and they're being implemented by staff. And in terms of the complaints policy process piece, as council is aware, that's certainly something that the system and the process is there, just putting more emphasis, I guess, on follow through on the complaints piece, so we don't have people coming back. Okay. Determining council's role in the campgrounds, as you're aware, in terms of what council has moved forward with, the Blythe campground. Has been indicated, there will be a report coming back to council at the next council meeting in terms of the future for, in particular, the Blythe campground. So you'll see that in a week or so. Harmonized police services, as you're aware, in terms of the province has approved the composition of the Huron Police Services Board, and as well in terms of that we're now going to be under the OPP billing model. So the entire municipality is going to be under one service, I'll call it. We are still, though, there's still regulations. The Huron Police Services Board, the composition of the board has been approved, but the province still has to pass a legislation to actually put that into place, and from a staff's perspective, we're waiting on those provincial regulations, and not just us, everybody in the province, to move forward on this. So we're in a bit of a holding pattern until the province releases those regulations for us to act on. Museum services, I won't, again, there'll be a report coming back to council with respect to providing an update, and then in terms of moving that particular project forward. And last but not least, the environment. This was the sixth or the last goal that was established, which is to protect our natural environment, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and support a healthy ecosystem. And there are 6 items under here, action items that council has given. The first item was to, or is to, undertake a review of the township's involvement in the tree planting program with a focus on cost recovery. So this is a report that we will be bringing forward in 2023. Second is explore educational opportunities for waste reduction diversions in North Huron. So new waste and recycling programs come into effect in May of 2021, and a new waste bylaw was adopted. Explore the possibility of adding more electric vehicle charging stations to the township on a cost recovery basis. And just for council's recollection, as you will recall, 2 new electric vehicle charging stations were to be installed here in Wingham, or one in Blythe.
Yeah,
Anyways,
one
in
in
Blythe and one in Wingham, right? And we were proceeding on that project on the basis that of the funding, the external funding that was available, but then for things that were completely beyond our control, that external funding did not materialize, and council was asked whether or not whether you wish to move forward with the project and fund it yourself, or how you wish to proceed, and council decided at that time not to proceed with the project. That said, from a staff's perspective, in terms of we're still continuing to investigate other possible funding sources for that to come to fruition. So if you were to see anything in 2023 budget, it was because we were successful in receiving some funding to move that forward. But strengthen the township's procurement policy to increase priority of sustainable and/or energy efficient products. As you will recall, there was an update done to the procurement policy earlier this year. That was brought forward and council approved it, and energy efficient, environmental was considered as part of that policy update. Implement energy conservation efforts to reduce the carbon footprint in all township municipalities. So just as a reminder, back in 2020, LED efficiency lights were installed here at Town Hall, and staff are planning to work with the Knights to have LED efficiency lights installed in the Knights of Columbus Center. So certainly, and I think it was alluded to earlier in terms of in terms of the completion of these projects, in terms of energy savings, better for the environment, but also economic savings or savings. The last one we have here is to explore the feasibility of a township environmental advisory committee. So again, this was identified as a long-term project. So long-term being it's something to be looked at and considered as part of 2023. From a staff's perspective, we will be seeking direction in terms of through the incoming council will be establishing their boards and committees. So from a staff's perspective, we will be seeking direction in terms of whether the establishment of an environmental advisory committee is something council wishes to move forward with as part of 2023. Indications on the strategic plan is that we will move that forward unless council advises or tells us otherwise. And last but not least, I have 2 slides here, just in terms of other initiatives and projects, I guess, that have been worked on that are, I'll call it outside the scope of the strategic plan. But these are certainly items that have been ongoing, and some of it we already touched on, but House and Dam was not in the strategic plan, but certainly has been moved forward through our Public Works Department. Over the course of the last 4 years, a new payroll system has been implemented. Health and safety program update, that is on the radar. As you're aware, we've hired a new human resource health and safety coordinator. So there's been a bit of transition of duties and responsibilities. Carson headed that previously, and Alyssa has now taken that on. So Alyssa's getting up to speed and very comfortable in the role, and we'll be moving that forward. Security for facilities, public works, permit relocation of council meetings, touched on that. We do need to look at developing and updating the procedural bylaw and for both our BAAs in terms of Wingham and Blythe. We have identified that they are dated. They do need to be updated. Carson, in particular, will be working with Dimitri and moving that forward. The elections already talked about. The HR manual already talked about. Additional technology for building services. This is in terms of, I missed it, or I maybe skipped over it, and I apologize, in terms of e-permitting. With you know, again, going back to the governance and modernization, you know, that basically, you know, getting to the point that people don't have to come to town hall to get their building permits. That's kind of what we want to get to. Consolidation of park maintenance. This is a conversation actually that myself and Jamie and Vicky have been having, and you will be seeing a report on the next council agenda regarding some operational recommendations or changes with respect to parks and trails. Townships for economic development, again, we've already touched on that. Rehabilitation of the North Huron West Cass Complex is something that's ongoing and being carried out through our Recreation Community Services Department. As been touched on, we're moving forward with implementation of the Universal Childcare Program, and again, this is not something that was specifically mentioned in the strategic plan, not something that was known when we did the strategic plan, but it is something that we are moving forward on. The new, it says recreation, but I think it should say recreation software and the records management. So that's just an overview, I guess, a summary in terms of, I think from a strategic plan perspective in terms of the last 4 years, I'm not sure what the rest of you think, but I think that we've made a lot of progress on the projects and on the initiatives, and we didn't know at the time things like COVID did slow us down. I mean, we managed it through, but you know, there were some projects that we just had to delay, I guess, because we had COVID restrictions in place. But anyways, but I think we managed through the COVID, and when you look at the whole 4 years and you look at what occurred over the 4 years, again, I think that we've done well.
Thank you, Dwayne. Are there any questions from the floor? Any comments?
So going back when you were talking about the former A2A lands, and was there any, were we left with any unpaid portion of any of the contracts that we had with the prior development company? Did they default on any, or were they up to date right to the end?
No.
Like as far as, you know, taxes and the permits and stuff that they were having to keep open up till the end there. Is everything up to date?
Through you, Chair Heffer, in terms of, so there's, so we, in terms of, the property's always been in private ownership. So in terms of, the property owner is responsible for all the costs associated with that particular property. I can't get, you know, in terms of taxations and things like that, you know, in terms of property taxes, for example, owing on the property, that's not something that able to share either way. But certainly there are, if there is money owing to municipality, there are mechanisms in place whereby we can recover it. So, but yeah, I mean, there's no, we don't have an accounts, we don't have, it's not that work was done on the property, and that we did work on the property or for the property, and we have an, I'll call it an outstanding invoice.
Okay, thank you. That answers my question.
Councillor Van Henderson?
Thank you, Chair. We didn't hear or see anything about Blight Festival in the Harvest States. Is this because they are a different, separate entity, or you don't have any information? How they're doing, how we move forward with everything? I think we have a certain agreement with them about the harvest stage. And when are they going to open up their doors again?
I have done, there's a meeting. Dimitri, do you want to? I have reached out to the festival and.
Okay.
So just through your chair, Heifer, in terms of, so I have reached out to the festival, and Dimitri is having a meeting with them about a number of matters, or some other, that's one of the items to be discussed.
Okay.
So I would suggest after your meeting in mid-November, we'll be able to give you a follow-through on that
Yep.
one.
Okay, thank you. Yep.
It's being worked on.
Thank you. Any other questions? Don't want to miss anybody? Okay. I just, thinking back to, it seemed like not that long ago, we were meeting at the fire station and coming up with this strategic plan. And, you know, you think, oh, we'll never get anything done, but we're seeing things showing completed here. It's nice seeing that, and other things that's coming through fruition there, that it's getting done. So it's very nice. So if there's no more questions, I'll take a bylaw number.
So we do need a motion for that first. So looking for a motion that the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby receives the report of the CAO dated October 28, 2022 regarding a status update on the township's 2020 to 2023 strategic plan for information purposes.
We have a mover, Anita. Second, Rick. All in favor? Thank you. Okay, we come, no closed session, reporting out. Number 7.1, bylaw of 9822. Do I have a mover? Rick? Seconder? Chris? All in favor? Passes. Adjournment. The Council of Township of North Huron agrees that there being no more further business before council, the meeting be hereby adjourned at
12:08 p.m.
12:08. Thank you.
Oh, you need a mover in a second.
Mover, Deb, seconder, Chris, you raise your hand.
I guess
All in favor? Thank you.